The bell for last period hadn't even finished ringing before the buzz started. It was a Tuesday, and the air in Oakwood Middle School, usually thick with the smell of old textbooks and cafeteria cleaning spray, now crackled with something else: anticipation. The notice had been posted on the main board that morning, bright yellow paper against gray cork. Spring Showcase, auditions next week. It screamed in big, bubbly letters. It was the biggest event of the school year, a chance to step out of the crowd of backpacks and homework and be, for 3 minutes, a star dot in room 214. The buzz was louder. This was Mr. Davies' music class, and he was standing at the front, a man with kind eyes and a sweater that always seemed to have a bit of chalk dust on it. He was the heart of the school's creative pulse. "All right, settle down, everyone," he said, his voice warm but carrying over the chatter. He waited for the scraping of chairs to stop. "You've all seen the poster. The Spring Showcase. This isn't just a talent show. It's a celebration of you, of the things that make you, you. And I want to see everyone from this class put their name down." A hand shot up from the front row. It was one of the popular girls, her hair in a perfect high ponytail. "Can we do group acts? Like a dance routine?" "Absolutely," Mr. Davies nodded. "Singing, dancing, magic, poetry, instrumental solos. The stage is yours." A boy from the baseball team grinned. "Can I juggle baseballs?" "You can try," Mr. Davies laughed. "But the principal might have a heart attack." Safety first. The class chuckled. The mood was light, excited. People were already whispering, forming pairs, thinking of songs. At the back of the room, by the window where the afternoon sun painted a long, warm rectangle on the scuffed floor, a boy sat quietly. His name was Leo. He had Down syndrome, a fact that was just a part of him, like his sandy brown hair that always stuck up a bit in the back, or his smile that seemed to take up his whole face. He loved Mr. Davies' class. He loved the vibration of the floor when the old upright piano was played, the way the drums felt in his chest. He listened intently, his eyes fixed on Mr. Davies. "A celebration of you." The words sat with him. While others talked about pans and tick-tock dances, Leo's mind went somewhere else. It went to his grandmother's living room, to the feel of cool, smooth ivory under his fingers. It went to the big, heavy book of simple classical pieces she kept on the piano stand. The pages, soft and yellowed at the edges. Mr. Davies handed out small slips of paper. "Write your name and what you're thinking of doing. No commitments yet, just ideas. Pass them forward." The room filled with the sound of scribbling and more whispered planning. Leo took his slip carefully. He held his pencil in a firm, deliberate grip. He loved to write. He concentrated, his tongue peeking out the corner of his mouth. In clear, blocky letters, he wrote, "Leo." On the next line, he wrote, "Piano solo." He looked at the words. A little flutter, part nerves and part pure excitement, danced in his stomach. He folded the paper neatly in half. The boy next to him, a kid named Jake, who was usually more interested in the basketball scores on his phone than in class, glanced over. "What are you doing, Leo? Drawing?" Leo shook his head. He unfolded the paper just enough to show him. Jake's eyes skimmed the words. His eyebrows went up, not in a mean way, but in a way that was surprised, like seeing a dog suddenly do a backflip. "Oh," he said, "cool." But the tone was the kind you use when a little kid shows you a scribble and says it's a dinosaur. It was a pat-on-the-head voice. He turned back to his own paper, where he'd written guitar. Maybe with Ben and Aiden. Leo didn't mind. He was used to people using that voice. He folded his paper again and passed it to the person in front of him. The paper began its journey up the rows, hand to hand. That's when it happened. A girl 2 rows ahead, receiving the stack, flipped through them idly. She saw Leo's. She stopped. She read it. A snort of laughter escaped her, a quick, sharp sound like a firecracker. She elbowed her friend, showed her the paper, and whispered something behind her hand. The friend's eyes widened, and she looked back at Leo, then quickly looked away, a smirk playing on her lips. The whisper traveled. It was a virus on a breeze. A boy near them leaned in, heard it, and a grin spread across his face. He didn't look at Leo. He just shook his head and said, loud enough for half the class to hear, "A piano solo?" Seriously? The words weren't yelled. They weren't a direct insult. But they hung in the air, oily and heavy. They were a dismissal. A few other kids turned, their glances flicking from the whispering group to Leo and back. Some expressions were curious, some were uncomfortable. A few held a trace of that same mocking smile. The idea seemed absurd to them. In their world, the spring showcase was for the gifted, the cool, the confident. It was for the clear-voiced singers and the smooth dancers. Leo, who spoke slowly and deliberately, who sometimes needed help finding his classroom, who moved through the hallways in his own thoughtful rhythm, he didn't fit that picture. To them, it was like a goldfish signing up for a marathon. Leo heard the words. He saw the looks. The warm rectangle of sun on the floor suddenly felt cold. The flutter in his stomach turned into a hard, cold stone. He didn't cry. He didn't get angry. He just looked down at his hands, resting on the desk. They were good hands, strong. His grandmother always said he had piano hands. He flexed his fingers slowly. Mr. Davies, busy collecting the slips at the front, missed the exchange. He gathered them all into a neat pile. Wonderful! I can't wait to see what you all come up with, he said, his voice full of genuine enthusiasm. The bell rang, a loud, jarring sound that broke the tension in the room. Chairs screeched as everyone jumped up, the moment forgotten in the rush for the door. Leo took his time. He put his pencil carefully in his bag, zipped it up, and stood. As he walked out, he passed the group that had laughed. They were already talking about something else, their laughter now about a funny video. It was like he was invisible again. The hallway was a river of noise and bodies. Leo let himself be carried along, his head down. He walked past lockers slamming, past shouts about homework and plans for the weekend. He felt separate from it all, wrapped in a bubble of that cold feeling. He was almost at the front doors when a voice stopped him. Leo? It was Miss Carter, the art teacher. She was young and had bright, kind eyes. She was carrying a giant box of clay. "Hi, Miss Carter," Leo said, his voice quiet. "I heard you might be doing something for the showcase," she said, shifting the box. She must have heard the gossip already. News traveled at the speed of light in this place. Leo nodded, looking at his shoes. Piano. Ms. Carter's smile didn't waver. It wasn't a pat-on-the-head smile. It was a real one. That's fantastic. I love the piano. What piece are you thinking of? Leo looked up, meeting her eyes. Not sure yet, he said. Something good. I bet it will be, she said. I'll be there to see it. And she meant it. She gave him a little nod and headed down the hall with her box. That tiny moment, that one real smile and those few sincere words, was like a pinprick of light in his bubble. The cold stone in his stomach shrank just a little. He pushed open the heavy front door. The afternoon sun was bright and real. His mother was waiting in her usual spot in her little blue car. He climbed into the passenger seat. "How was your day, sweetie?" she asked, leaning over to kiss his cheek. She was a woman who always looked a little tired, but whose eyes were always warm. "Good," Leo said, buckling his seatbelt. He looked out the window as the school shrank behind them. He didn't tell her about the laughter. He didn't tell her about the cold stone. He held it inside. Instead, he asked, "Can I practice when we get home?" His mother glanced at him, surprised. He usually needed a little downtime after school. "Of course you can," she said. "Grandma will be thrilled." At home, the house was quiet. His grandmother was in the living room, reading by the window. The old upright piano stood against the wall, a silent, dark wood presence. It wasn't a fancy piano. It had a few scratches and one key that stuck sometimes if you didn't hit it just right. "Hi, my love," his grandmother said, putting her book down. "How was school?" Leo just walked straight to the piano. He opened the fallboard, revealing the yellowed keys. He sat on the worn brown bench, the familiar dip in the middle welcoming him. He placed his hands on the keys, the cool smoothness a comfort. His grandmother watched, saying nothing. She knew his rhythms. Leo didn't play a song. He just pressed a single key, middle C. The note filled the quiet room, warm and solid. He held it until the sound faded completely into the silence. In that silence, he could still hear the echo of the laugh. The word "seriously?" He pressed the key again. This time, he answered it with the G above it. The two notes together made a sound that was strong, certain. He played a simple scale, up and down. The music, even just these basic notes, began to push the cold feeling away. It filled the spaces inside him that the laughter had tried to shrink. He turned to the big book. He flipped past the beginner pieces, the ones with the silly pictures. He turned to the back, to a page that was well-worn and soft. At the top, it said "Fur Elise" in elegant script. It was a real piece, a beautiful one. He'd been working on it with his grandmother for months, note by patient note. He positioned his hands. He took a deep breath, and he began to play. It was slow. A few notes were hesitant. The sticking key gave a little hiccup, but the melody was there, clear as a bell. It was sad and sweet and hopeful, all at once. His mother stood in the doorway, listening, a dish towel in her hands. She heard the concentration in the pauses, the determination in the correct notes. She saw the way his whole body leaned into the music. She didn't hear a boy with a disability struggling. She heard her son, speaking a language that was truer than words. The cold stone he carried, she knew nothing of it yet, but she heard the answer to it, right there, in the quiet. Persistent music filling their living room as the sun began to set. The flyer for the spring showcase went up on the main bulletin board the next day, printed on crisp white paper. It had a graphic of a shining spotlight. Under the heading "Confirmed Acts," the list was growing. People would stop by between classes, looking for their names, pointing at their friends. Leo saw his name. There it was, about halfway down. Leo Bennett, piano solo. Seeing it in print made his stomach do that little flip again. It was real now. He was really going to do it. He thought that would be the hard part, putting his name down. But that was just the beginning. It started in the hallways. School hallways between classes are like a strange, fast-moving river. Everyone has a place in the current. Leo usually floated along the edges, a quiet observer. But now, people were looking at him. Not looking at him to say hello, but looking at him with different eyes. He was walking to math class. His backpack straps held tight in his hands when he passed a group of older boys from the grade above. One of them, a tall guy with a varsity jacket, nudged his friend and nodded toward Leo. "Hey, there's the concert pianist," he said, not even bothering to lower his voice. His tone wasn't mean, exactly. It was mocking, like he was pointing out a funny sign. His friends chuckled, a short, dry sound. They kept walking, leaving Leo standing there, feeling suddenly very visible in the worst way. The next day, in the lunch line, it happened again. 2 girls from his grade were behind him. He heard one of them whisper, "The one doing the piano thing in the showcase." The other girl replied, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "Oh, that's so cute. I hope he doesn't get stage fright." Cute. The word landed like a slap. It wasn't a compliment. It was a way of making him small, of putting him in a box labeled not serious. He took his tray and found his usual spot at a quiet table. The chatter of the cafeteria, feeling like it was coming from far away. The worst moment came a few days later. He was at his locker, struggling with the combination, which sometimes stuck. A boy from his science class, a kid who was always loud and trying to be the center of attention, came strolling by with 2 of his friends. "Leo." "My man," the boy said, slapping him on the back too hard. "Heard you're gonna rock the piano. Gonna play chopsticks? Or maybe Twinkle? Twinkle." His friends snorted with laughter. Leo finally got his locker open, his face feeling hot. "I'm playing a real song," Leo said, his voice low but firm. He focused on getting his books out. "Oh, a real song," the boy said, mimicking his deliberate tone. "Watch out, Mozart. Seriously, though, good for you. It takes guts." But as he said, "guts," he winked at his friends, and they all walked away, shaking their heads with smirks. That word, seriously, seemed to follow him everywhere. It was always in the air, a question he couldn't answer with words. It wasn't just the students. Even some of the teachers, the ones who meant well, added to the feeling. His homeroom teacher, a nice woman with glasses, pulled him aside one morning before the bell. "Leo, I saw your name for the showcase." "How wonderful," she said. Then she leaned in, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "You know, if you're feeling nervous, you could always do a duet. Maybe with someone from the band? Or you could just play a very short, simple piece. There's no pressure." She was smiling, she was kind, but her words were like bars on a cage. She was trying to protect him, but she was also telling him, without saying it, that what he had planned was too much. That he shouldn't try the real thing. Every comment, every laugh, every well-meaning suggestion was like a drop of water on a stone. Alone, each one was nothing. But together, they were starting to wear him down. The cold stone he'd felt in Mr. Davies' class was back, heavier now, sitting in the middle of his chest. He came home from school one afternoon looking so defeated that his mother, Claire, saw it immediately. She was folding laundry in the living room. "Rough day?" she asked, putting a stack of T-shirts down. Leo dropped his backpack by the door with a thud. He didn't answer. He just walked over to the piano and lifted the cover. He didn't play. He just stared at the keys, his shoulders slumped. Claire came and sat on the bench beside him. She didn't touch him. She just waited. Finally, Leo spoke, his eyes still on the black and white keys. "Everyone thinks it's a joke." His voice was so quiet, so full of hurt, that it made Claire's heart ache. She knew. She wasn't blind. She'd heard the sideways comments from other parents at pickup, the how brave remarks that were really about pity. She took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. "Tell me about the song," she said softly. "The one you're playing with Grandma." Leo was silent for a long moment. Then he placed his right hand on the keys. Very slowly, without any flourish, he played the first few notes of the main theme from Fur, Elise. The familiar looping melody filled the quiet room. It sounded lonely, but beautiful. "When I play it," Leo said, struggling to find the words for a feeling that was too big for them, "it doesn't feel like me anymore. It feels like the song. And the song isn't a joke." Claire looked at her son's profile, at the fierce concentration in his eyes even now. She saw not a boy who was less, but a boy who was touching something more. "Then that's what matters," she said, her own voice thick. You and the song. That's the only thing that's real. All that other noise out there. She waved a hand toward the window, toward the world of the school. That's just static. You can't listen to static, Leo. It will just confuse you. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He played the few notes again, a little stronger this time. Later that evening, his grandmother came over for dinner. After they ate, she and Leo went to the piano as they always did. She could tell he was carrying a weight. "Let's forget the notes for a minute," she said. She placed his hand on her own wrist. "Feel." She began to hum the Fur Elise melody, and he could feel the vibration in her arm, the rise and fall of the music in her body. "This song," she said, "it's not about getting every key perfect. It's a conversation. It's asking a question and then answering it. It's light and then it's shadow. You don't just play it with your fingers. You play it with your whole self." She had him close his eyes. She played a phrase. "What color was that?" she asked. Leo thought. "Gray, but a shiny gray. Like a rainy street." "Good," she said, smiling. "Now you play it and make it a rainy street." He did. And for those few minutes, the static his mother talked about faded away. There was only the rainy street, the shiny gray feeling under his fingers. The laughter in the hallway, the whispered cute, the patronizing smiles. They couldn't touch this. This was his. But the next day at school, the static was back, louder than ever. Auditions were coming up, and the buzz was intense. People were practicing guitar riffs in the stairwells. Groups of dancers were working out steps in the gym after school. The air was full of ambition and competition. During lunch, Leo walked past the open door of the auditorium. Inside, a girl from the 9th grade was singing a pop song with a voice so clear and powerful it gave you chills. A little crowd had gathered to listen. They clapped and cheered when she finished. Leo stopped and watched from the doorway. He saw the admiration on their faces. He saw the singer beaming, soaking it in. A deep, slow doubt began to creep into his heart. His piece was quiet. It was old. It wasn't flashy. It was just him and a piano. Would anyone even listen? Or would they just sit there, waiting for him to finish so the next exciting act could come on? He thought about his name on the list. Leo Bennett, piano solo. It suddenly looked very small, very alone on that big white flyer, surrounded by the names of bands and dance crews. He turned away from the auditorium door and didn't look back. The cold stone was back, and now it had a new layer, fear. Not fear of making a mistake, but a deeper, colder fear that his mother was wrong. That the static wasn't just noise. That maybe it was the truth, and he was the only one who couldn't hear it. The week of auditions arrived, and the school felt like a beehive that had been poked with a stick. Every empty room hummed with the sound of someone practicing. You could hear the thump of bass from a speaker in the janitor's closet, the screech of an electric guitar tuning up in a science lab, the frantic tapping of a dancer's feet in the hallway near the gym. Leo's audition slot was on Wednesday, right after school. All day, his stomach was a tight knot. The cold stone of doubt had settled in for good, a constant heavy presence. In his head, he kept hearing the girl's powerful pop song from the auditorium, then imagining his own quiet, classical notes dying in the air, followed by an awkward, pitying silence. He walked into the music room after the final bell. It was set up like a mini-stage. Mr. Davies sat at a desk with a clipboard, a kind but tired smile on his face. A few other kids were there, waiting their turn. One was a boy with a saxophone case, tapping his foot nervously. Another was a group of 3 girls, whispering fiercely to each other about their harmonies. "Leo, you're up next," Mr. Davies said gently. "Just relax. Play what you've prepared." Leo nodded, his throat too dry to speak. He sat on the piano bench, the same one from class, and waited. The group of girls went. They sang a current pop song. It was good. They were a little pitchy in one spot, but they had energy. Mr. Davies made a note and said, "Great energy, ladies." "Thank you." Then it was his turn. The room felt huge and quiet. The other kids watched, curious. He placed his hands on the keys, took a shaky breath, and began. He played the first page of For Elise. His fingers knew the notes. They really did. But they felt stiff, like wooden sticks. He was so focused on not making a mistake, on proving something to the silent room, that he played without any feeling. It was robotic. Halfway through a run of notes, his finger slipped, hitting 2 keys at once with a jarring clash of sound. He stopped dead. The wrong note echoed in the quiet room. His face burned. He could feel the eyes of the saxophone boy on him. "It's all right, Leo," Mr. Davies said, his voice encouraging. "Take your time. Start from the beginning of that phrase." But the spell was broken. The fear had won. He tried to start again, but the music was gone. All that was left was a series of instructions his fingers had forgotten. He stumbled through another few bars, and then just stopped, his hands falling into his lap. He stared at the black and white keys, humiliated. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, barely audible. Mr. Davies' expression was soft. "No need to be sorry. Auditions are tough for everyone. Thank you for sharing what you had." He made a mark on his clipboard. It wasn't a mean mark, Leo could tell, but it felt like a verdict. Leo got up from the bench, his legs weak. He didn't look at anyone as he gathered his backpack and walked out of the room. The hallway was empty. The sound of his own footsteps was loud. He had tried, and he had failed, right in front of everyone. The laughter in the hallways, the whispers, they had been right all along. He didn't go straight home. He walked the long way, through the park near his house. He sat on a swing, not swinging, just letting the chain go slack in his hands. The thought of quitting, of telling Mr. Davies to take his name off the list, was a warm, tempting blanket. It would be easier. No one would be surprised. They'd probably nod and say it was for the best. That night, he didn't touch the piano. His grandmother came over, but he said he had a headache and went to his room. He lay on his bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. He could hear his mother and grandmother talking in low voices in the kitchen. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was worried. The next day at school was worse. The news of a bad audition travels fast. He saw people look at him and then quickly look away. In math class, the boy who had joked about chopsticks gave him a thumbs up, but it was a sarcastic one, a final twist of the knife. Leo felt invisible again, but this time it was the invisibility of failure, not of being overlooked. He was a story that had ended predictably. 2 days later, a notice appeared on the music room door. Spring Showcase Final List. A crowd was gathered around it. Leo hung back, not wanting to see his name crossed off. He was about to turn and walk away when Mr. Davies came out of the room. "Leo," he called. "A word?" Leo's heart sank. This was it. The gentle let down. He followed the teacher into the empty room. Mr. Davies didn't sit at his desk. He leaned against it, arms crossed. "I've been thinking about your audition," he said. "I know it was bad," Leo said quickly, wanting to get it over with. "It wasn't bad," Mr. Davies corrected him. "It was nervous. There's a world of difference." He paused. "I heard you stop playing. But before you stopped, in the very first few measures, I heard something. I heard the song. Just for a second. It was like you opened a door to a quiet room, and then got scared and slammed it shut. Leo looked up, surprised. "I put you on the final list," Mr. Davies said. Leo blinked. You did?" "I did. But on one condition." Mr. Davies walked over to the piano. "You have to play for me now. Not an audition. No clipboard. Just play. Play it like you do when no one is listening. Play it like you did for that 1 second before you got scared." Leo felt a flutter of panic. "But no one else is here, Leo. It's just a piano in an empty room. The same piano you practice on in here during lunch sometimes, isn't it?" Leo hadn't realized Mr. Davies knew about that. Sometimes, when the room was empty, he would come in and play, just to feel the keys under his fingers. It was the only place at school where the static faded a little. Slowly, he walked to the piano. He sat down. The room was silent. The afternoon sun slanted through the high windows, filled with dancing dust motes. He could see the empty chairs, the silent music stands. It was just him and the instrument. He thought of his grandmother's voice. "It's a conversation." He thought of the shiny, gray, rainy street. He wasn't playing for Mr. Davies. He wasn't playing to prove anyone wrong. He was just going to visit that street again. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he placed his hands on the keys and began. He started from the beginning. This time, he didn't think about his fingers. He thought about the question the melody was asking. He played the notes softer, leaving space between them. He let the quieter parts almost whisper, and when the melody rose, he let it rise naturally, like a breath. He didn't rush. He played through the part where he had messed up, and his fingers found the right notes, not perfectly, but smoothly. He wasn't fighting the piano anymore. He was talking with it. He played the whole first section, the part he knew by heart. When the last note faded, he kept his hands on the keys, feeling the final vibration die away into the sun-warmed quiet of the room. He finally looked up. Mr. Davies hadn't moved. The teacher's face was completely still. He wasn't smiling his usual encouraging smile. He looked struck, like someone had said something profound, and he was still processing it. The silence stretched on for what felt like a full minute. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was a full one. "Leo," Mr. Davies said finally, his voice hushed, almost rough. "Where did that come from?" Leo didn't know how to answer. "It's just the song," he said, repeating what he'd told his mother. Mr. Davies shook his head slowly, a look of dawning understanding and something like shame crossing his face. "No," he said softly. "That wasn't just the song. That was you inside the song." He walked over and put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "I owe you an apology." Leo was confused. For what? For not seeing it sooner. For hearing the notes and not the music. Everyone in this building. We've been listening to the wrong thing. He took his hand back and looked at the piano, then back at Leo. "You're on the list, and you're going to close the first half of the show." "But the first half? Isn't that for the good acts?" Leo asked, the old doubt creeping back. Mr. Davies gave him a look that was completely new. It was a look of pure respect. "Leo, what you just played, when you forgot anyone was listening, that wasn't just good, that was real. And real is what this show needs more than anything." He picked up his clipboard. "Now, I want you to practice here, after school, on this piano. Get used to it. This will be your space. Can you do that?" Leo looked around the quiet, sunlit room. The static was gone. For the first time since he'd put his name on that slip of paper, he felt a spark that wasn't fear or doubt. It was a tiny, steady flame of something like courage. "Yes," he said, "I can do that." The world narrowed to a single point, the piano in the music room. After that talk with Mr. Davies, everything changed, yet nothing changed at all. The hallways were still the same. The looks he got were still a mix of curiosity and leftover mockery. But inside Leo, something had shifted. He had a secret. He had a place. Every day after the final bell, when the school began to empty out, Leo would go to room 214. Mr. Davies would leave the door unlocked for him. Sometimes the teacher was there, grading papers at his desk, offering a quiet "sounds good," or "try that phrase a little slower," without even looking up. Most of the time, Leo was alone. The piano in the music room was different from the one at home. The keys were a little heavier, the sound a little brighter, more formal. At first, it felt like playing a stranger's instrument. But day by day, note by note, he made it his own. He would start with scales, just to feel the resistance under his fingers. Then he would move into his piece. He didn't just play Fur Elise from start to finish anymore. He lived inside it. He took it apart. He practiced the tricky run that had tripped him up during the audition, over and over, not until it was perfect, but until it felt like a natural part of the story, like a quickening heartbeat. He worked on the soft, questioning middle section until it truly sounded like a secret being whispered. The silence of the big, empty room became his friend. In that silence, he could hear every nuance of the sound he was making. He could hear when a note rang true, and when it sounded forced. He learned to listen not just with his ears, but with his whole body, the way his grandmother had shown him. One afternoon, about a week before the showcase, he was deep into the music. He was playing the part that always felt like a struggle turning into hope. His eyes were closed. He didn't hear the door open softly when he finished the section and let the last note hang. He opened his eyes. He jumped a little. The saxophone boy from the auditions was standing just inside the door, his case in his hand. He looked embarrassed, caught. "Sorry," the boy mumbled. "I left my music book in here." The door was open. "I didn't want to interrupt." That was really good. Leo didn't know what to say. "Thanks," he managed. The boy quickly found his book on a stand. He hesitated at the door. "You're playing that for the show?" Leo nodded. "Cool," the boy said. And this time, the word didn't sound empty or pat on the head. It sounded genuine. He gave a little nod and left, closing the door quietly behind him. It was a small moment, but it was a crack in the wall. Someone had heard the music, not the story around it. At home, the energy was different too. His grandmother focused on the emotion. "Make me feel the breeze in that part," she'd say. "Now make it sound like a memory." His mother stopped asking if he was nervous. Instead, she'd listen from the kitchen, and sometimes he'd come out to find her just sitting on the couch, her eyes closed, a small smile on her face. "It sounds like a story," she told him once. But as the week of the performance arrived, the old fears began to creep back in, dressed in new clothes. It wasn't fear of the notes anymore. He knew the notes. It was a fear of the bigness of what was coming. The posters for the spring showcase were everywhere. They had his name on them. They had everyone's names. The school talked of nothing else. The popular dance crew was rumored to have a killer finale. The girl with the amazing voice was going to sing a song she wrote herself. The pressure was a living thing in the hallways. His secret, quiet after-school sessions, felt suddenly very small against the huge, dark cavern of the actual auditorium. He had to practice on the stage, Mr. Davies told him. Get a feel for it. Walking onto the stage for the first time was like walking onto another planet. The auditorium was vast and dark, empty except for a few ghostly work lights. Rows and rows of empty red seats stared back at him. The stage felt too big, too open. The grand piano, loaned for the event, sat in the center under a lonely spotlight, looking like a black, shiny spaceship. His footsteps echoed. Mr. Davies was out in the seats somewhere. "Take your time, Leo. Get used to it." Leo sat on the bench. It was different. The piano was massive. It sounded huge and echoing in the empty space. He played a chord, and it boomed, startling him. This wasn't his friendly music room piano. This was an instrument that demanded to be heard by hundreds of people. The cold stone of doubt, which had shrunk during his weeks of practice, grew again, heavy in his chest. He tried to play his piece, but it sounded thin and lost in the big space. He felt tiny. All the quiet, careful feeling he'd practiced seemed to evaporate into the dark air. He stumbled, his hands feeling clumsy again. From the darkness, Mr. Davies called out, "Don't fight it, Leo. The room is big, so your feelings have to be big, too. Fill the space with them." But Leo couldn't. He finished, his heart pounding not from the music, but from panic. This was a mistake. He couldn't do it here. The next day was the dress rehearsal. This was the worst. Now the auditorium was full of the other performers, chatting, laughing, tuning instruments. The buzz of 100 conversations filled the air. The stage lights were all on, hot and blinding. When it was his turn, he walked out, and he could feel dozens of eyes on him. He saw the dance crew watching from the wings, whispering. He saw the pop singer looking at her nails, bored. He sat down. The moment his fingers touched the keys, his mind went blank. It was like the audition all over again, but 10 times worse. He played the first line, and it was dead. No feeling, no rainy street, no story. Just notes. He messed up early and had to stop. A faint, sympathetic groan came from someone in the seats. "From the top, Leo," the student stage manager called, not unkindly. He started again. He got a little further. But it was a disaster. It was technically okay, but it had no soul. It was the shell of the music he played in the quiet afternoons. When he finished, there was a smattering of polite applause, the kind you give to someone who clearly tried hard but failed. He walked off the stage, his face hot with shame. He didn't look at anyone. He just wanted to disappear. As he passed the group of dancers, he definitely heard one of them mutter, "Well, that was quiet." He spent the rest of the rehearsal sitting in a back row, wrapped in a cloak of misery. He watched the other acts. They were so confident, so loud, so sure of themselves. The dancers' routine was sharp and exciting, full of energy that made the crowd whoop. The singer's voice filled the room effortlessly. Everyone belonged here except him. He was an old, faded photograph in a gallery of bright, moving pictures. That night, he couldn't eat. He sat at the kitchen table, pushing his food around his plate tot. His mother and grandmother exchanged a look. His grandmother reached over and put her wrinkled hand over his. "What's in your head right now?" she asked. "Everything," Leo whispered. "The lights, the people, all the seats. My hands felt like someone else's hands." "Ah," his grandmother said, nodding. "You were playing for the seats. You were playing for the lights. You can't do that." "But they'll be there," Leo said, his voice desperate. "Everyone will be there listening." "Let me tell you a secret," his grandmother said, her voice low and warm. "When you walk out there tomorrow, you are not walking onto a stage. You are walking into our living room. That piano on stage? It's our piano. The only person in that huge, dark room is me, sitting right here, listening. And maybe Mr. Davies sitting over there in his chair. And your mother in the doorway. That's all. The rest of it, the noise, the lights, the people, it's just a dream, a fog. You are playing for us in our quiet living room on a Thursday evening. That is the only thing that is real. Can you do that?" Leo looked into her calm, sure eyes. He thought of the empty music room, the sun, the dust motes. He thought of the feeling when the music was just a conversation between him and the song. He nodded slowly. "I can try." "Good," she said, squeezing his hand. "Then that's what you'll do. You'll come into our living room, and you'll tell us that beautiful, sad, hopeful story one more time. Just for us." Later, in bed, Leo didn't think about the crowd. He didn't think about the other acts. He ran the music through his head, not as notes, but as a path. A path from his front door, down the rainy gray street, past the memories, into the hope, and back home again. It was a path he knew with his eyes closed. It was his path. And tomorrow, he would just walk it, one step, one note, at a time. The rest was just fogged out the night of the spring showcase arrived, and the air outside the Oakwood Middle School auditorium crackled with a different kind of electricity. It was the buzz of families, of perfume and hairspray, of siblings chasing each other in their good clothes. Inside, the lobby was a warm, noisy sea of people holding programs, searching for their seats. Backstage was another world. It was organized chaos. A nervous energy hummed in the cramped, dim space behind the heavy velvet curtains. The dance crew in their shiny outfits stretched and slapped each other's hands for luck. The pop singer stood in a corner, eyes closed, silently running through her lyrics. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and the waxy scent of stage makeup. Leo stood by himself, near a rack of old theater props. He wore the simple button-down shirt and dark pants his mother had laid out for him. He held his hands still at his sides, trying to remember his grandmother's words. Asterisk, it's just our living room. The rest is fogged out asterisk, but the fog here was very loud. It was the thump of bass from the speakers as the sound crew checked levels. It was the rustle of costumes and the sharp, clipped voice of the student stage manager calling out, 5 minutes to places. He could hear the muffled roar of the audience, settling in hundreds of voices, chairs scraping, a baby crying somewhere. The sound was a physical thing, a wall of noise that made the cold stone in his chest feel like a block of ice. His mother found him. She'd gotten the backstage pass to help. She didn't say good luck or you'll be great. She just put her hands on his shoulders and looked into his eyes. Her own eyes were a little shiny. "Just go tell the story," she whispered. "Your story." She kissed his forehead and squeezed his shoulders once, hard, before the stage manager shooed all non-performers out. The show began. The opening number was a big, cheerful dance routine by the 6th grade club. The music was so loud it vibrated in Leo's teeth. The applause that followed was a crashing wave. Act after act followed. A comedy skit that had people laughing. A martial arts demonstration with impressive shouts and kicks. Each burst of applause from the other side of the curtain felt like a measurement, a benchmark of success he was sure he couldn't meet. He was closing the first half, just before intermission. As the act before him, a boy doing impressive magic tricks, took his bows, the stage manager pointed at Leo. "You're on. Stand by." The magician ran off, grinning, giving Leo a quick, breathless thumbs up. Leo walked to the edge of the heavy main curtain. His heart was a frantic bird trapped in his ribs. The stage manager nodded. "Go." Leo pushed through the gap in the curtain and stepped into the light dot. It was blinding. The stage lights were a white-hot furnace, melting everything beyond the first few rows into a formless, dark void. He could see nothing of the faces, just a vast, black sea. But he could feel them. He could feel the weight of their attention, their expectation, their quiet rustling. It was utterly, terrifyingly silent now that he was out here. The only sound was the tap of his own shoes on the wooden stage floor, echoing terribly. He saw the grand piano. It sat in a lone circle of light, looking even bigger and shinier than before. It was a beast. He walked toward it, the sound of his footsteps the only thing in the universe. From the dark, he heard a single clear cough. Then a whisper, too loud in the quiet, from somewhere near the front. "Is this the kid?" He reached the piano. He adjusted the bench, the squeak of the wood horribly loud. He sat down. The leather of the bench was cool. He looked down at the keys, a waterfall of black and white. His hands hovered above them. They were trembling. He tried to think of the living room, but the fog was too thick. The silence from the audience was a pressure, waiting for him to fill it. He thought they were waiting for him to fail. He took a shaky breath, and it sounded like a gasp over the quiet. He placed his fingers on the starting notes. He pressed down. The first 3 notes of Fur Elise came out. They were too loud. They were clumsy. They echoed in the huge space, stark and alone. It was a bad start. From the darkness, he was sure he heard a faint, almost imperceptible shift, a collective sigh of disappointment. His mind screamed. This was it. This was the moment the laughter returned. His fingers froze. He couldn't remember what came next. The path was gone. He was lost in the fog. He sat there, paralyzed, for what felt like an eternity. The silence deepened, becoming heavy, awkward, painful. He was humiliating himself in front of everyone. He wanted to get up and run, but then, as he stared at his frozen hands, he didn't see the stage lights reflected in the shiny wood. For a flash, he saw the rainy, gray street. His grandmother's voice was in his ear, not as a memory, but as a feeling. It's a conversation. This wasn't a performance. This was a conversation that had started with a wrong note. And in a conversation, you just kept talking. He didn't start over. He simply lifted his hands and found the next note, the one that answered the first 3. He played it softly, like an apology. Then the next. He wasn't trying to play the song perfectly anymore. He was just following the sound, trying to find his way back to the story. He played the next phrase slowly, giving each note room to breathe. As he played, a strange thing began to happen. He stopped trying to fill the silence. Instead, he started to listen to it. The silence of the audience wasn't mocking anymore. It was listening, really listening. He played a little louder, pouring the lonely feeling of the rainy street into the notes. He let the melody rise, not with force, but with a gentle sorrow. He forgot about the black sea. He forgot about the lights. He remembered the sun in the music room, the dust motes dancing. He was playing for that. He found the tricky run that had haunted him, and instead of fear, he felt the quickening heartbeat of the music, and his fingers flew over it, not perfectly, but truly. It sounded like hope breaking through. He was deep inside the song now. He was the song. The outside world had dissolved. It was just the conversation between his heart and the piano. He played the quiet, whispering middle section as if telling a secret to the only other person in the room. He built the final phrases, not to a crashing finale, but to a soft, resolved goodbye. When he played the last, lingering note, he held the pedal, letting the sound shimmer in the hot, still air of the stage until it faded into nothing, into absolute silence. He slowly took his hands from the keys and placed them in his lap. He was back on the stage. The fog cleared. The silence was now a living thing, thick and complete. It was not the silence of boredom or disappointment. It was the silence of breath being held, the silence of something being broken and rearranged. He looked up, squinting against the light. He couldn't see them, but he could feel hundreds of people utterly still. Then, from the darkness, a single sound, a sniffle, then another, a choked sob, quickly muffled. And then applause. It didn't start as a roar. It started like rain on a roof, a few scattered, earnest claps from different parts of the void. Then more joined, and more. It swelled, not into the wild cheers for the dance crew, but into something deeper, louder, more powerful. It was a wave of sound that was full of respect, of awe, of apology. It was thunderous. It was standing. He could see them now, figures rising from the black, row after row, becoming people again, their hands coming together in a continuous, roaring storm of noise. Leo stood up, his legs wobbly. He turned to the dark, blinking. He gave a small, uncertain bow. The applause doubled, crescendoing. He saw Mr. Davies at the side of the stage, not clapping, just standing with his hands over his mouth, his eyes wide. He saw his mother and grandmother at the back of the auditorium, holding on to each other, both crying openly. He walked off the stage. The moment he stepped behind the curtain, the sound was muffled, but it was still there, still going. The backstage area was silent. The dance crew, the pop singer, the magician, all the other performers were just standing there, staring at him. No one smirked. No one looked away. Their faces were stunned. The pop singer had tears in her eyes. The leader of the dance crew, the one who had whispered, just nodded at him slowly, a look of pure, unvarnished respect on his face. The stage manager, a tough older student, clapped him on the back, hard. "Dude," was all he said, his voice rough. Leo walked through them, to the corner where his prop box was. He needed to sit. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving him shaking. He had done it. He had told the story. And for the first time, in the echoing remains of that roaring silence, he understood. They hadn't just heard the music. They had heard him. And the boy they thought they knew, the boy they had laughed at, was gone. In his place was someone they had to listen to. The silence had been his answer to all of it, and it was more powerful than any laughter had ever been.